Hey, so thank you for joining me on the Coach's Locker podcast. This is episode 58. And episode 58 is a lot different than any episode I've had. What I did here on episode 58 is we've got a roundtable of myself and four African American coaches. Okay? Here's what happened. Like many of you, the death of George Floyd and the aftermath of that, the last couple weeks in our country has propelled me to think, what can I do? What can Chris Fore, a assistant principal, soon to become principal? That's kind of some news for me lately. I'll be starting as a principal at a new school out here in Southern California, July 1st. But what can I do as a white man with this situation at hand? And so I thought I want to use my voice, the platform I have with a podcast that's listened to, by hundreds and hundreds of people all over the nation. How can I just share stories? And I had a discussion last weekend with a black friend of mine who shared a story of being a coach and walking out when he was coaching a CIF championship game and walking out, to home plate. And when he was out at home plate, the other head coach there was a white man, and the umpire was a white man. The umpire crew was white. And, one of the umpires said to him, make sure you control your team. And he didn't say that to the white head coach there. And that story really just made me sick to my stomach. It's not that I don't, trust me, I understand African Americans can tell stories like this for days. Unfortunately, the racial profiling you'll hear us talk about on the podcast here. So I do understand that, but I just thought, here we are. This was like 2017, and then he wrote it. He said, I was demoralized before a CIF championship baseball game during pregame ground rules by being told to handle myself professionally or I would be thrown out. And he says, what? He said this to me because I'm black. And, that story a very good friend of mine told me just made me sad. And it made me think, I want to get together some coaches who can share these stories just so those listening who think that, it's not really a big deal. These African Americans, this doesn't really happen in 2020 anymore. Or, these guys don't get racially profiled like they want to say they do, or like we just see happen on TV with the George Floyds of the world who are killed. No, it does. It happens all the time. So I just wanted to get a roundtable of some coaches together to hear their voice. And I think one of the things you pull out of this is kind of exactly what we try to do with this podcast. Just listen. Listen and be empathetic. And so joining me today, head coach at Trinity International University in Chicago, Illinois. It's an NAIA football program, Lamont Butler. From Azusa Pacific University, NCAA Division II school out here in Southern California. Craig Robbins, offensive coordinator at Chaffey College here in Southern California, out in Rancho Cucamonga. Artie Allen, and the head football coach at Silverado High School in Victorville, Southern California, Kieran Jones. So those four men join me on my podcast here. Again, we have a roundtable. Kind of neat. I just thought of that. We had a head high school coach, a junior college coach, a Division II NCAA coach, and an NAIA coach. That's kind of cool how that ended out. But here's a text I sent out to a bunch of African American coaches who I consider to be friends. I said, hey, I want to use my social media and podcast platform to help non-African American coaches better and more clearly understand how to work, lead, disciple, mentor African American student athletes. I understand this is a deep issue, and I capitalize deep, that cannot be resolved in a 60 to 90 minute podcast. But if it can help at least a dozen coaches, we've done something powerful. And I could say if it would help at least one, we've spent our time well. I said, obviously, America has a lot of work ahead of us. It all starts with one person at a time. I want to host a Zoom conference call. It will be recorded and put on my podcast platform. It won't be live, just us on the call. I want you to share about your experiences as an African American. I want you to help us better understand what an African American teenager is going through that we might not have a full grasp on. Then I gave him some details. Here's when we're going to be recording it. And then I said, here's the outline. I'm going to have you briefly share about your playing experience and coaching experience. So you'll hear each of my 4 guests today. They'll talk about that. I want you to share about a time you've been racially profiled. How did that feel? What happened? And then discuss what it's like for a young black man or woman in 2020. What are the kids we coach and teach? How are they really feeling? What are they dealing with? What do we non-African Americans need to know about our African American kids, how they're thinking and feeling? And then the last question, the 4th question was, how can we non-African American, non-black coaches, teachers, administrators, how can we really, what are some things we can practically do to help these students, these athletes and their parents? What do we need to do or not do in trying to help our African American students? So that's what this podcast is all about. A lot different. Again, I wanted just to use my my voice, my podcast platform here to have this discussion. I really thank these 4 men for coming on today, spending an hour of their time. I've had conversations with some of the other guys I reached out to who just weren't able to make it for one reason or another at the time we recorded this today. But thank you for listening. I think you'll hear some powerful stories from these 4 men. I think you'll hear some insight from these 4 men. And I want you to multiply out what you hear times thousands and thousands and 10,000s and 10,000s and millions, really, of stories just like this. Stories that have impacted your student athletes, stories that have impacted your assistant coaches, maybe the teacher in the room next to you. These stories are real. These stories are sad. These stories are powerful. And again, I just hope that this podcast will help us just kind of better understand each other, better understand what our African American student athletes, friends, family members, coaches are having to deal with daily. And then more importantly is not just listening to these stories, but acting on them, as you'll hear us talk about how to do that. Thanks for being here. You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker Podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach Fore. That's at COACHFORE. And my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. Now, let's get after it.
up, forget about the past, 'cause you and I's everything I ever asked for. Top down round the West Coast.
All right, welcome back, guys. Thanks for checking out this podcast, and I'm excited about our panel, our group today. Each of them is going to introduce themselves to you. I gave a brief introduction for each of them, but right now I'm going to have them also give an introduction here briefly about themselves, where they're at, how they got to this point in their coaching career. Coach Butler, we'll start with you.
I'm Lamont Butler. I'm the head football coach at Trinity International University. I played my college ball, played 2 years at Grossmont Junior College, then transferred up to Sacramento State, where I finished out there. Right after I graduated, came back to San Diego. So I'm from San Diego, California originally. And I started playing ball, started coaching right after I graduated. I coached at, El Cajon Valley High School, Helix for a year, and then also at Horizon Christian Academy. And then I actually got an opportunity to go to Trinity in 2012 and coach running backs. And then I was there for a season because I was only a restricted earnings. Wife made me come back home. I wasn't making a lot of money. And so, but then I actually ended up taking over at Horizon as the head coach. So I was the head coach at Horizon for 3 years. And then, again, had the opportunity to come back to Trinity in a full-time role as a defensive coordinator, assistant head coach. So in 16, I came back to Trinity, coached at Trinity 16 and 17. And then our head coach actually stepped down after the 17 season. Then I was promoted to head coach in 2018. So this will be going into my third year as the head football coach.
Yeah, and for those listeners who've been listening for a while, 2 years ago, we talked with Coach Butler every week. So this is the same man, Coach Butler. Welcome back to the Coach's Locker podcast. And thanks for coming. Coach Butler, for those high school guys who might want to reach out to you about recruiting, where can they find you on Twitter?
My Twitter handle is at Coach Butler TIU. So at Coach Butler, BUTLER, and then TIU. That's where you can find me on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Coach. Coach Jones, over to you.
I appreciate the invite, Coach. My name is Kieran Jones. I'm currently the head coach at Silverado High School. Going into what would be my second year whenever we get started. I was there as the DC for the prior 7 years under head coach Rafael Janorio. Grew up in LA, went to LA, Washington my 9th and 10th grade year. Moved to Long Beach, played varsity football at Long Beach Wilson, go Bruins, for 2 years there. I was young when I graduated, so decided to stay local and go to Mount Sac. Went there, ended up redshirting, and then ended up having to stop playing football because in the situation where I had to work, and you can't work, go to school and play football. So pretty much it for me, Coach.
All right, Coach. And where can guys find you on Twitter?
I am at Kieran, Keron, Jones, Jones 9.
Yeah, again, Coach Jones is right here, head coach Silverado High School for those in Southern California. Silverado High School is right here in Victorville. Coach, thanks for joining us here today.
Anytime.
Coach Artie Allen, we'll go to you next, Coach.
All right. How's everyone doing, first of all?
Yeah, we're doing well, Coach.
Good.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. I know everyone here other than Coach Butler. So nice to meet you, Coach Butler.
Likewise.
But I'm Artie Allen. I'm from the Inland Empire area. I grew up in Rialto, San Bernardino. Played ball there in that area. Went to Rialto High School, Bloomington High School. Played at Chaffey College, where I'm coaching now. And after that, went and played Division II ball in New Mexico at New Mexico Highlands University. Started coaching in 2008 at Carter High School for Coach Alex Pierce. Spent a couple years there with him, and then I went back to my alma mater, New Mexico Highlands, coached there for a year. From there, went to Arizona Western, which is a community college in Yuma, Arizona. Came back to California, Carter High School again for one more year. And then from there, I went to Chaffey for the first time as a coach. I was there for 2 years at Chafee, and then transitioned to Oak Hills High School, and then back to Chafee. And so that's kind of my coaching stops along the way. And, obviously appreciative, Coach, of having me on to talk about some of this stuff, especially right now, with where we're at in our world and in our country and, and everywhere. So, a lot to talk about. But again, I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for joining us, Coach. And Coach, tell them where they can find you on Twitter.
So I'm going to be at Coach Allen 5.
And that's ALLEN, at Coach Allen 5. Hit him up again. He's at Chafee College here in the Inland Empire, one of the top junior colleges out here in California. Coach Allen likes to light up the scoreboard, don't you, Coach Allen?
Oh man, I don't do it. The players are the one lighting it up, but we've done a pretty good job over the last couple of years. So hopefully we can keep that going.
Yeah, outstanding.
Don't let him be so modest.
There he is, Coach Robbins, from coaching at my alma mater. I didn't play football there, but where I went to school, I love Azusa Pacific University here in Southern California, NCAA Division II school. Coach, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. First and foremost, appreciate Coach Fore for giving me this opportunity, man. I'm really, really thankful for this. My name is Craig Robbins. I'm currently the running backs coach at Azusa Pacific University. I grew up in Carson, California, where I attended Carson High School. After my time at Carson, I played for the legendary John Featherstone at El Camino College. From there, I had a brief stint at New Mexico State University before eventually coming back home and transferring to, ironically, Azusa Pacific, where I got to play first for Peter Shinnick, who recently won a D2 championship, and then lastly, my senior year, got an opportunity to play for Victor Santa Cruz, who's now in the DC at the University of Hawaii. So my senior year was his first year as head coach. As far as coaching, immediately out of college, I didn't get into coaching. I was fortunate enough to land a front office job in professional baseball. So I did that for a few years, but just, that corporate lifestyle just wasn't as gratifying for me. And then finally, I made the jump. Didn't know what, money wise, how it was going to work out, but I just had to do it, which is overwhelming for me. And so I got my first coaching crack at Canton Sacred Heart of Mary in Montebello, California. From there, I got the opportunity to coach under Doug Simonis at Occidental College. Got to coach under Brian Smith, who's now the offensive coordinator at Washington State University. And then from my time at Occidental, moved over to East LA College. From East LA College, I transitioned to coach at Chafee for Coach Hadaway. Spent 3 years there. The last two were with Coach Allen. That last one was exciting, 2018, where we beat on a lot of folks, made a lot of people angry. And then now I'm, going into my second year at APU, so it's been tremendous.
Awesome, guys. Well, again, thanks for having us. We kind of introed the purpose for this podcast a little earlier, before your introductions here. So we're going to jump right into this, guys. And what I want to know, and, this is a sensitive question to ask, but I think it's a very important question because as I've been talking to some of my African American friends, and one of the things I've learned the last week or so here is some of them have said to me, don't call me African American. I am Black. And I'm proud to be Black. And that's what I want to be referred to. So I don't know, each of you, how you like to be referred to. That might be an interesting question as well. But what I want to know is, would you share with us a time that you were racially profiled? Something happened to you where it was because of the color of your skin. And so we'll just start with whoever wants to share. Not all of you need to share on this answer, but just open it up for whoever wants to go first.
I could jump in. I think there's been, numerous times I can count where I've been, been in that situation. As a Black man, you have to be mindful of your surroundings, I think, at all times, especially, living in San Diego. There's a lot of different cultures, and there's a lot of diversity. And so depending on the areas you're in, you definitely have to be mindful of that. I can recall one night, I want to say probably my sophomore year of college, we're at my boy's house, and it's probably maybe 11 or 12, and we're hungry. So we're like, all right, we're going to go to, we're going to get something to eat. We're going to go to Jack in the Box or Sonic's or something like that. And he lived in Santee. And so I don't know if you guys have heard of Santee, but Santee is predominantly a white area, and they're known for Ku Klux Klan activity. And so,
Coach, yeah, just like maybe 3 weeks ago, before this George Floyd death and video surfaced, something surfaced of a guy down there in a Santee supermarket wearing a hood. Did you a KKK hood? Did you see that?
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So we were driving, and my boy, he's black as well. So he's black. He lives in Santee though. He grew up there, lived there, and all that. So we're driving, and immediately, like, we're driving down the street, and I see a police car get behind us, and so I'm nervous. I'm like, dang, police are behind me. All right, let me see something. So I made a right. Police car goes right behind me, still following me. Make another right. Police car still behind me. Make another right. So now I'm back on the same street that I was on, and I was just trying to figure out, all right, is he following me, or was he just behind me, and I don't have anything to worry about? So then he gets behind me, doesn't flash the lights, but kind of shine, not flash like the red and blue lights, but shines like a bright light into the back of our car.
That side spotlight thing?
Into the back of our car. And then we turn, and then he just goes. So that's been a time. There's been other times I know where I was pulled over because the police officer said that he saw me getting ready to run a stop sign when I saw him clear as day. And I'm like, I'm looking at you, looking at me, and you think I'm gonna run this stop sign.
Wow.
And so they pulled me over, and luckily I have my Horizon coaches stuff on, and he let me go, and I was just, in my mind, I'm like, my goodness, like, this is. And so those are a few times. I don't want, there's another time, but I don't want, that one's a little bit more sensitive, just because it has to do with where I work. I don't know how many people are going to be listening, so I'm gonna go ahead and hold on to that one. But there's times where you definitely, you can feel those things happening, and when they're, when they're going on.
So I'll jump in here.
This is Coach Allen.
I think this is Coach Allen. I think that it depends on what your definition of racial profiling is, because you can get racial profiling for basic things that you do daily. Someone sees me and they're startled, and so they move to the other side of the street, or there's small instances of things that happen like that. But in my experiences, one instance is when I traveled to Wisconsin, actually, to visit some of my family, and I was at New Mexico Highlands, so I had to be around anywhere from 20 to 22 years old. And my family, my aunt at that time, she lived in a really, really nice neighborhood. And I think a lot of times that's where this stems from. Something, it's almost like Coach Butler's, story was similar, but very, very nice house, very, very nice neighborhood. My cousin's car wasn't necessarily the nicest. And I don't know if that's what, kind of got the police on us, but we end up getting pulled over just as we're turning into the house. And so as we turn into the house, the police are very aggressive and angry and adamant of the fact that we're pulling into this house. And they were not happy about us pulling into this house. And there was an assumption that we didn't live there right away. And so, ultimately, my cousin was very upset. He, didn't handle himself the best way possible in that circumstance, because it was his mom's house, and he was, I guess, upset at the fact that they didn't believe that he lived there, and so ultimately my uncle eventually, came outside, came to the door. We were sitting on curbs by that point, and it got straightened out eventually after proof that we were living there. There's been other instances, kind of growing up in San Bernardino, where, I might have got pulled over and asked to get out of the car, which, is probably not protocol, right? I mean, unless there's a warrant or unless there's something that determines that you need to get out of the car, you shouldn't have to. But I've been told multiple times to get out of the car. And I've done it, being naive to what rights are and everything like that. But, ultimately to check, my driver's license, or to check to see if I have any warrants or whatever the case may be, and then eventually let go. In my experiences personally, there hasn't been much past once they figure out, who we are, we've been let go. But I do have friends and other people that have shared some experiences where it was, it was more difficult for them in that situation, and things were done to them that shouldn't have been done, as far as like roughing them up, putting them on car hoods, whatever, you hear it all. But, things like that take place regularly. And, I think, part of the issue a lot of times is people don't believe that that's possible, or people don't believe that that actually happens when it does, because they can't fathom it, because their life isn't like that, or they don't have to worry about that. And I know we're going to dive into more questions here, but I just wanted to share my, couple of experiences there with, just things that shouldn't have happened, that happened. And, like I said, from people that I know, other people, it's gone beyond that, so.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to hear from you guys, because, I never been asked to step out of the car being pulled over. I've had 3 or 4 speeding tickets in my life. I've been pulled over other times for tinted windows, but that's not something I've ever had to deal with. Hey, get out of the car. It's always been, like you said, Coach, it's been, they follow the protocol, which has been driver's license registration, So, and that's why I think it's important for us to hear these stories, not the stories you see on CNN, when something blows up big, but these everyday stories that these real men and women are dealing with, just like the rest of, coaches who might be hearing this, who have heard of these stories, and they can identify because they have family or friends or themselves who have dealt with this kind of profiling, or the coaches who think, that stuff doesn't happen. It does. And that's what I wanted to share these stories about. Who wants to share about a story here where you feel like you were racially profiled in that way?
This is Coach Jones. I'll share a story. This was probably 97, 98-ish. I'm a teenager at the time, dating a girlfriend who lived in Inglewood, and we weren't even driving. We were sitting outside in my car, and cop comes the other way down the street. Unfortunately, you get this feeling when you see the cops, and in my mind, I'm like, he's going to turn around. Sure enough, he turns around, pulls up behind us, asks me for my information, give him my license and registration, asks her to get out the car. Now, this is middle of the day. This is not at night or anything like that.
And Coach, was she black also?
She was black also. He asked me to put my hands where he can see them. So obviously being pissed off, I stick one out the window, one out the sunroof. And they take her kind of to the back of my car or whatever, and they start questioning her. And, afterward, she comes back and she's like, hey, they were trying to get me to say this car wasn't yours, when the address on my license matched the registration. Everything was legit. You could even got me for the tinted windows because the windows were tinted. But they had her maybe for about 5 to 10 minutes, question her about who am I? Why am I here? Is this my car? And my mother had that conversation with me about how to interact with the police. So of course I'm not losing my mind. She's losing her mind. I'm in a situation where I can't go out and help her because I know if I open this door, all hell's going to break loose. So eventually, they let her come back to the car. They give me my stuff, no explanation or anything. And they just drive off. And we're just sitting there like, what the heck just happened? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And like Coach Butler said, and Coach Allen, there are instances where we're racially profiled, but because it's become such a daily normal thing, you don't even realize it until you get home and you like, wait a minute, that person did this or this person did that. And it's just sad that unfortunately we've become accustomed to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. And I'll just, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off there, but I'll just kind of add to Coach Jones there with everything that happens. If we don't handle ourselves in the right manner, then it's our life. These circumstances that we're explaining, we pretty much handle these the best that we can, but there's times I think where the frustration comes in by the individual being profiled, and that person starts to show his or her frustration, and they start to be animated, and then all of a sudden it blows up into more than what it could have been, So I think that's where it starts usually, is unfairly being profiled, and then depending on how the person being profiled handles it, depends on if he walks out alive at times.
No, a very, very good point. Do you guys see that most of you, I think, are, I don't know, I'm 44. Am I the oldest one here?
38 here.
Yeah.
36.
Coach Butler, how old are you?
I'm young, baby, 34.
34, okay. So you guys are all under 40. But have you seen, since you could first remember that talk from your parents maybe about how to handle yourself around the police, or back, you can remember during the course of your lifetime, do you think that these issues you've discussed, have these gotten better or worse during the course of your lifetime, or the same, or can you even quantify that? You know what I mean? Does that question make sense?
This Coach Jones, I don't think you can quantify it because now, to put some perspective on this, I grew up in South Central LA, about 2 miles away from Florence and Normandy.
Yeah.
And where police incidents happen quite often. But now you have phones with cameras, so it makes it more visible. So there are a lot of stories that I've heard, some believable, some unbelievable, where you didn't have camera phones and, a lot of that stuff wasn't get out. It was kind of like folk tales, kind of things you've heard in the streets. Where now, and I say we're blessed. We're blessed to have these phones to where when people are in situations, they're turning their phones on. I was driving down the street the other day. 2 cops were off to the side. And you know what goes in my mind? Okay, if these dudes pull me over, I'm going to FaceTime my wife so she can witness this. You see what I'm saying?
Wow.
So I don't know personally if I can say it's gotten better or worse or the same, but I think with the invention of the cellular phone and all that stuff, more of this stuff is coming to light than it did in the past.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and that's what I was sharing. Just my family today at lunch, we were talking about this. My kids are young. My oldest one's 13. And I said, what's really sad, you guys, is that Coach Jones, you told me a story, and I can't remember the man's name right now. What story did you tell me this week to look up?
Chavis Carter.
Chavis Carter. If you've not heard the story of Chavis Carter, please Google that, read the story of that man, because that happened in 2012 before there was a lot of social media. I think if it happened today, you'd probably see it out on social media. But Chavis Carter, African American male who died from a gunshot wound while handcuffed in the back of a police car. I mean, the story is just it is outlandish. But as I started doing a little research on that, he's not the only one to die that way. Sadly, very sadly. I mean, I can't even believe being that man's family, what they had to go through in that situation. But like I was telling my kids, the advent of the cell phone is what got us here where there's these discussions now. Because one of my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter said, "Dad, do you think if that wasn't recorded, would this even have been a big deal?" And I said, sadly, no, baby girl wouldn't. Because somebody recorded it, it became this big deal. But anybody, African Americans, Hispanics, white people, anybody who's been mistreated and it wasn't recorded, we never did hear about it. But this kind of brutality, this police brutality, has happened a long time, and it's because I think that's a great point. Because of the cell phone, it's becoming more evident to us, and that's where we are today with this another senseless death here of George Floyd.
So I think, just to kind of add what Coach was saying there, I think it's gotten better. But I think it's gotten better because of white people that care about it and technology. I think there's a combination of both. There was a time, obviously in our country where that would have been perfectly fine and everyone would have went home, on their merry day and went and had dinner. And then there was a time where some people started speaking up against that, and there's some people that are of Caucasian descent that don't think that's okay, and then, I think moving to where we are now, you can see that's what you see. You see, there's white people out there that are supporting it, and now, there's more pressure on the people that are racist and want certain systems and certain things in place to make changes, and that's ultimately what it is. It's sensitivity, that comes from the white community that ultimately helps the situation.
Yeah. I agree. Guys, share with us, and again, it's kind of my main reason for doing this right here today. This podcast is to shed light on what our student athletes, our students, maybe they're not an athlete, but for those listening who teach or they're an assistant principal, discuss for me, what is it like for a young black man, a young black woman in 2020? What are the kids we coach and teach? What are they feeling? What are they dealing with? I mean, you guys talk about, one of you was just sharing how a police car came behind you and you started feeling a certain way, and the other three started shaking your heads, because you all identify that when there's black and white behind me, I start feeling a certain way, right? What is it like for a young black man, woman in 2020? What is their mindset? What is their feeling about their just being a student on a campus that's predominantly white, perhaps, or predominantly black? I mean, what are these kids dealing with in 2020?
I think it's, and I work at a predominantly white institution. And so I deal with some of these issues at times where guys feel that, they're being racially profiled, and, we obviously have to have those conversations with whoever we have to have them with. I think that in 2020, man, what is it? We're in June, so 6 months. These kids have been through a lot.
Yeah.
And it's, you put, first and foremost, Kobe Bryant, who a lot of them, not a lot of them, but majority of them looked up to, right? His death. And I know that caused, ripples. I know with like guys on my team, they took that really hard. Like we not have to like have a sit down and talk about it, but I know, they mourned Kobe's death. And then, so now after Kobe died, then you got the COVID that comes in, and then now they got to be displaced from their school. You go to distance learning. Some of them, it was I think that was a gift and a curse for some of them. Some of them do a lot better online. Some of them, they had to adjust to it. But then also now you got the whole George Floyd thing. And I think that, what is happening isn't anything new from when we grew up. I think a majority of their parents have taught them hey, this is how you got to interact with the police. This is what it's going to be like to be a black man in America. These are the things that you need to do to make sure that you come home at night. And I think for one thing that I think about when we're talking about like the whole racially profiling thing is it's become the norm for black students or black men, period, that we don't really think about it. Like Coach was saying, like we don't really think about it because it's something that we're trained to do, or we're trained to interact with the police. We're trained to keep a cool head in a meeting that, as the head coach, there's a lot of meetings that I go into and I have to navigate my way through or code switch and how I, come at certain issues. If I agree a certain way, I know I can't respond a certain way because it's going to be frowned upon, right? And so I think that our black students now, what they're going through and what they're feeling is, one, it's hard, right? But two, in the wake of all of this, and what I told my guys last week was, I said now, and this was all of our team, not just our black students, but all of our players. I told them, I said, now is the time where you guys can be heard because everyone is listening, right? If you looked at, the whole protests and the George Floyd incident and all of that, all 50 states had a protest in some way, shape, or form. And that's unheard of. Usually, like I was talking to a pastor the other day, and I said, like, when Ferguson happened, there were protests in different areas of the country, but not all 50 states. When Tamir Rice, when he was killed, there were protests in different areas, not all 50 states. And so, but now you get this one, and all 50 states are in on the protests, and now they see that it is a problem. Now I think that their voice can be heard more than ever. And so it's kind of a gift and a curse because now they're starting to understand and starting to feel that they have a voice, and that they can now be heard. But they still have to understand that, or they still understand that, all right, I got to figure out a way to do it to where I'm not coming off as, the angry black kid or the kid that doesn't listen or something like that. And so I think that's the thing that I'm talking specifically for my guys, because I got guys on the south side of Chicago. I got guys in South Central LA. I got guys that, they live in the South and all those types of things. And so they all deal with this differently, and they all experience it differently. But I think for them now is a time where they feel that, like, they're starting to feel and starting to wake up to the fact that their voice will be heard. But also I think they're still, processing, okay, what it's like to be a African American or a black man in society today, because they still have those things that they have to follow, right? Those unwritten rules that your parents have to teach you before you leave the house. And so they're still dealing with, processing that and why does that have to be like that? But now they're asking themselves why. And then now they're asking and looking for, okay, what can I do to change it? And so that's what I would say that they're dealing with, in terms of just 2020 has been a crazy year for 6 months. For half the year, it's been insane, and they've had to deal with a lot. And, now I think this is a time that's really woken them up and allowed them to kind of see the type of impact that they can have in this world. So.
Thanks for that. Coach, do you think that the kids you've talked to during your time here, well, young men, they're not kids there at your level, but and I guess anybody could chime in on this, and then the others are going to want to answer that question I asked about what it's like, in 2020. But Coach Butler, do you think that because of what you referred to, so much more, many states, so much more outcry with this death, do you think this gives those kids hope? Does this give the African American community hope, or does it just this is just another time? There's going to be outrage and then it'll disappear. I mean, do you guys think there's hope in the black community?
I think it's a start. I definitely think that we have to see the follow through with what happens afterwards, right? Because so many times, right? It's one thing to get a conviction, right, or get somebody, someone's arrested, the big outcry is just justice, right? And I it's funny because like if I'm on Facebook, and now you're starting to see comments on both sides of the fence, right? People who, they agree with the protests and the Black Lives Matters and all those things, and then there's people who still deny what's going on, right? There was a guy who said that, like today, Rashay Caldwell was killed, and somebody had posted, we're not going to see the Black Lives Matter protesters out for this murder and whatever. And, when I see things like that on the internet, because I don't like to get into back and forth, I'm not going to sit on my phone all day and type back and forth with you. But I felt compelled. I was like, I gotta, now is the time we have to educate some people because they don't know or they refuse to know. And when you don't speak up about it, then that gives them the pass to say, oh, well, nobody ever spoke up to me about it, or I never heard it. Or there might be some guys who they just don't know, and you have to educate them. And I basically told them, I said, if they find out who killed Rashay Caldwell, those guys are going to be in jail. I said, but if, George Floyd, or whoever before him, right, when they were killed, I think I watched the video, there's like only 2 or 3 cops out of the, last 8 or 9 incidents with a police officer killing an unarmed black man, only 3 have been convicted and sentenced to jail, right? And so oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off there. I think ultimately it's like blasphemy to even think to compare those two situations, because we're talking about the people that are supposed to protect us compared to a criminal. Right. And that's like that person to me is willfully or purposely ignoring what the real situation is. And I think that's, Chris, when you ask, how do our young men feel? They're frustrated. They are untrustworthy. Or not untrustworthy, but they don't trust people. They are frustrated. They are fearful. There's a lot of different things you can say that they are right now. Mainly it's because, when these things come up, it's okay, well, what can we do to fix them? The people that are being profiled or killed or whatever the case may be, we're asking them what to do when it's not their issue. It's not their. We need to ask other people we need to ask the people that are doing it. We need to ask the people in charge. We need to ask, the politician, what do we do? So, I love conversation and opening up and talking about it, but ultimately, we're not the ones that can answer this. I think there's people above us that can answer these questions.
Yeah. No, well said.
And for me, I really feel like this is going to really be impactful because the people that it doesn't directly affect are just as vocal as, the African American community. And that's a huge difference from all the other, killings and protests that have taken place. People that it doesn't directly affect are now getting involved and being on the front line of this. So I think we're going to see for sure going to see a change in this.
Do you guys what do you guys think if you had a golden wand, right? If Coach Allen, if you did have the power to change things, what do you think's the number one thing that needs to change?
The person's heart.
Yeah.
That's where it is. This doesn't stem from nothing. It's our history, and ultimately, if I had a magic wand, I'd change every racist heart to just be someone that cares about someone's character more than what they look like or what they represent or whatever the case may be. That will be the main thing. And then, understanding, I think there a lot comes from misunderstanding of cultures and misunderstanding of language and, body language and everything else. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but ultimately just care about people.
Yeah. And I think that's one reason, the world has gotten smaller in the last 10 years because of technology, right? I mean, shoot, we can bring 5 of us together right now. And so I think that's one reason we've seen, that outrage, Coach Robbins, like you talked about, finally people that this doesn't affect are speaking up. And, Coach Butler, he talked about all 50 states being involved. I think that's one reason why now is because of the world becoming smaller. And hopefully hearts that have changed, as you referred to, Coach Allen. So kind of wrapping up this discussion, and what I want to know, guys, is how can we non-Black, non-African American teachers, coaches, administrators, I want to know what are some real practical things that us as white coaches, a white teacher, white assistant principal, white principal, what can we do to better help our African American students? What can we do to better understand them? If I'm a head coach, if I'm a position coach, etc. I really want to, I think this is the most, not to devalue the experiences that you guys have shared here, you've opened up, and I appreciate that. But moving forward, what is each of your advice on how we can do a better job? Because I really think, as Coach Allen said, it's a heart issue, right? What is your advice as to how we can practically change people who think there's not a problem? Or what can we be more sensitive about? Work with our kids in better ways. Or maybe you could share, you know what? When I was growing up, this coach said this, man, he went about it the whole wrong way. It should have been talked about like this, so that's what I'm asking. It's a very wide open-ended question about what are some things we can do.
I think the main thing is listen.
Yeah.
Too many times white people feel that they can solve every problem in the world that's ever happening.
Yeah.
And this is not a problem that they are able to understand because it's not happening directly to them.
Yep.
And I think that they need to listen and understand, our viewpoint and where we're coming from. And so many people, they look at, they're looking at it from 2 different perspectives. They're looking at it from, you got the Black people's perspective, you got the white people's perspective. And if we want to be real about it, right, there's only one perspective that matters, and it's God's perspective, right? And, there's a right and a wrong. And is what is going on, is that right? Right? Are other people's lives valued more than other people? And I think the big thing is just white educators, white coaches, white teachers, white administration. They just need to listen to what these students are saying, what their experiences are. And, don't just take them with a grain of salt and say, oh, you're just making this up, or nobody's listening to it, or you're nobody, I don't feel that way, or I'm teaching it that way, or I'm acting that way towards you, right? Listen to what they're saying and take value in that. And don't think that you can just solve the problem. Listen to what they're saying and then figure out ways for you to be better. I think if they do that, then that's where a change can start. But not just thinking, okay, what do you need me to do to fix this problem for you? The thing everyone needs to do is just listen and educate themselves so that they can figure out, how to, love people better, right? And it's not just about, white versus Black, but it's loving a human being and valuing another human being's life. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Coach.
And I would like to add to that, because obviously listening is number one. But what you do with that information is powerful. When, as coaches, we go to coaches clinics, we fellowship, we do different things to perfect our craft. If you're an administrator, you do things to perfect your craft. And in this particular situation, a lot of times Black people are looked upon to educate white people on what's going on. And this is my personal opinion, but sometimes it's frustrating that we have to provide the education. If a kid is hurting and you want to know what a kid goes through and you want to perfect your craft, COVID-19 made it a perfect situation. We're all sitting at home. Just take a few minutes, a few hours out of your day and just research some of the things that have gone on, with police and Black people, and just kind of educate yourself on it. And then you'll kind of understand, okay, I kind of see where they're coming from, because it's years upon years and decades of frustration. And, I don't think any one of us could sit down and just say, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. But a lot of times we're looked at to teach the other races how we feel. The information is out there. Go look it up. Like I told you about the Chavis kid, it's out there. Just take some time, look it up if it's in your heart. And I think, to me, that's how you can help these kids the best. And just one other nugget too, I know when we briefly discussed earlier, don't say you're colorblind. So that's one thing that bothers me a lot. My color means a lot to me, as well as your color means a lot to you. So I think we need to embrace each other regardless of color, understand our differences. Yeah, you may be white or whatever, and I may be Black, but don't treat me different because of it. So to me, colorblind is kind of like a cop-out. I don't see color. No, see my color, but just don't treat me any different because of it.
I like that, Coach. And so what's powerful about that is because then that treats you just like the individual you are, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is Coach Allen again. I think what we do as coaches and what we should be doing as coaches should cover what we should do. And that's caring about our players, caring about their personal interests, and really not making it solely about football, and if you truly care. And, the issue is, the kids can see through when you are, just trying to put on a show or put on a front to make sure that kid plays as hard as he can for you, as opposed to truly caring about that individual and what they go through. So, I just think it's just, care beyond them being an athlete. Do what you can to learn about them personally, things they've been through, things they've gone through. Get out there and do some work, whether it's, obviously right now, a lot of the protests and things are going on, but there's, I think Coach just put up a link to a place you can, maybe reach out to and help, whether it's financially or whether it's just getting out there and doing some stuff. Find out. We can find out everything else in the world. We can find out how to, bake oatmeal raisin cookies by looking up on Twitter. You could do the same thing with how to help this kind of situation. You know what I mean? And so I just think that, if you want to help, then you shouldn't have to ask other people how to help.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
For me, like Coach talked about, the listening portion, but also empathizing, with the players. There's a lot of, especially when the whole Colin Kaepernick situation first took place, there's a lot of people who were, opposed to listening to the message. They were just about the flag, and didn't really put themselves on the other side of things. And like our head coach, Rudy Carlton, that's why I love him. I think he's going to be a great leader. Before we even address the team or anything, he talked to the entire staff and even, the 4 or 5 of us that are African American, like, how can I address the team? Like, tell me, guys, about your experiences. What can I do differently? And there's a lot of coaches that, they don't want to have those conversations. And I think you got to get in front of those and have that. A lot of coaches, want to sit and say, it's in vogue to say, yeah, I want to, build men through football. But a lot of these coaches, they ain't trying to do that. They use that as a, as a buffer. But, a lot of times they don't even address these kids off the field. And so I think, getting out in front and having those conversations. I mean, for us at Azusa, we're a religious institution, so we have discipleship groups. Coaches meet with their players all the time, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about X's and O's. And, you may not have discipleship groups where you're quoting scripture, but you can have, groups where we're just talking about their mental health, talking about life, how to do a resume, how to handle when you're in a situation with the police, anything to better themselves. And I don't think, coaches are doing that. It's just about ball, and then after ball's over, everyone goes their way. So that's one way we can get out in front and get better at building these men up.
I love that response. It is. I don't think it doesn't matter what color the players are, right? It's getting in that way. It's getting to know them, to know them, to help them as real men. Coach Butler, you put out a link to all of us here in the chat, the Gray Challenge, the Gray, GREY challenge.com. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that was just something that it's a resource that was brought up to. It was I saw a friend post about it, and it's basically an educational, help educate whites on this issue. Essentially, so there's like movies to watch, and there's a lot of movies and that they can watch and just talk about, because some people, they'll sweep the history under the rug like it didn't happen, right? You hear people say, man, slavery was 400 years ago, get over it, right? There's some people who do say that, but then you got 9/11, never forget, right? And so
that's powerful right there.
Yeah, and so there's things that they can, instead of sweeping something under the rug, like just trying to understand it and, have those conversations. Like now we can't, there shouldn't be a football coach in America who's not talking to their team about, these issues, right? And if they're not, they're totally wrong, because if this issue affects one player on your team, right, then it should affect all of them. And I think that, the Great Challenge is just, a group of movies that you can go watch, and, it talks about, actually having discussions about, what you saw, and discussing with different, people who look like you, people who don't look like you, so that, when these things do happen in the United States or in the world, right, there's not a, you understand where people are coming from. You understand why Black people feel the way they feel over the last 400 years. And, I think that if people understood, the history, then they would understand why we're so upset and things like that now. There's no way that a high school, elementary student, or a college Black kid should have to learn how to interact with the police, right? There's no way that I should be saying, well, if you get stopped by the police, this is how you need to handle that situation.
Yeah.
The police officer should know how to, react, and then, or how to act in that situation, and then everything should be fine. But we have people who, instead of protecting and serving, they let their emotions get the best of them, or, what's really in their heart get the best of them, and then you get what we get. And so, the Great Challenge is just a piece to educate people and, help them see what that history is, so that they can really think about it and talk about those things. Because that's the thing, we don't, people are afraid to talk about it, and there can never be change if we don't have those uncomfortable conversations. Because if you don't have the uncomfortable conversations, everything is going to stay the same.
It all stays the same. You're right. You're right. I'm curious, as you guys have been meeting with your teams, maybe to talk about these issues right now with Floyd, and maybe not, but have any of your players asked about, hey, what are we going to do? Are we going to kneel this season? Has there been any kind of actionable items your teams have talked about yet?
I can speak from our program at Chaffey College. There's been nothing organized as far as, hey, we're going to go do this. I think, if you feel it in your heart to do that, then we're not going to hold anyone back from doing that at all. But ultimately, that's been done before. I think it's past that at this point. And, like I said, if there's someone that still feels that they want to do that, then I'll support them 100%. And I'm sure our head coach would as well. But, there may be some things and we could probably all put our heads together and figure it out, but there may be some things that are more actionable or, some things that we can get done from a local standpoint or from, just within our own control, that may be a little bit better.
We actually had a team meeting last week about it. So when the whole situation happened, I was like, man, this is crazy. So I had to process it myself, because when I saw it, I went back to, well, here we go again. And then, all right, what can I do now to get over this and not think about it or not let it affect how I go about doing things. But then I was like, you know what? I have to address our guys about it. And so we just talked to our guys about, George Floyd's life or his run-in with the police is the reality for some guys, right, on our team. So it's not that, they're going to get killed if they're stopped by the police, but, they think differently when they encounter the police. Some guys, they just don't understand. Some guys, they have to, they're just oblivious to it because everybody in their town looks like them, right? And so I think that our guys haven't come up with anything actionable. I know some of them probably will kneel. And again, we won't hold them back or anything like that from it. But then I'll also talk to them about what are the things that you are going to do to make that change. We talked to our guys about that. Now is the time where, you guys can have a real impact in this world because everyone is listening now. And so I told them to start thinking about ways where you can change the narrative or you can help with the issues that are going on in this world today, and not just, not just protesting just for the sake of protesting, or, not just protesting and not having a plan of action afterwards to continue to affect that change, right? Because it's one thing to kneel and say, yeah, I kneeled, but then it's another thing that, all right, I kneeled, and then I went and affected the change that needed to be. And so, again, nothing set in stone, but definitely encouraging them and pushing them towards actionable change.
Yeah, for us, we don't have anything like officially set in stone, but our head coach has provided us, the opportunity to, we have our regularly scheduled discipleship meetings, and in those meetings, the players have the platform to discuss how they're feeling about this. Our coach has been encouraging for those guys to participate in protests, obviously, peacefully and things like that. I'm sure we'll come up with something, but for now, even in our team meetings, we can't really talk X's and O's right now, but, in our meetings, just talking about just, what's recently been going on, and just the platform during our Zoom calls, just to talk about whatever it is on their heart, as far as this police brutality situation. Yeah.
Well, guys, hey, I thank you for your time. This again, my heart with this whole thing is that, 10 coaches open their eyes, or teachers or whoever, open their eyes and does become more sympathetic towards those they are leading, who are African American, who are Black, who have faced these challenges that you guys have shared. I thank you for being vulnerable, sharing your stories today, sharing some of your wisdom and insight. And, again, thank you very much. Much appreciated for spending an hour of your time here this afternoon. And I hope the rest of you guys have a great rest of the day.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris, for having me on. And good to see you guys, Craig, Coach Robbins, and Coach Jones. And good to meet you, Coach Butler.
Nice meeting you too, Coach. Appreciate you, Coach Fore.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you for that platform to speak on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, guys. Again, thanks so much. Listen, I'm gonna send you guys each I'm gonna send a group text message right now. I love being able to connect guys up. So each of y'all, you got 3 different levels of football here, and you got one high school guy here. So and he turns out some talented athletes out of the high desert. So and then obviously
they're coming to Chafee. So.
Yeah.
I just sent out the text with my number in it. So if you guys need it, man, use it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, guys. Again, thanks so much, and really appreciate your time.
All right, thank you, brother.
All right, we'll see you guys.
You guys enjoy yourselves.
All right, bye-bye. So, hey, thank you for listening to the Coach's Locker podcast. I really hope that you got something out of today's roundtable. Again, I want to thank Coach Butler, Coach Jones, Coach Robbins, Coach Allen for coming on today. Follow them on Twitter, reach out to them, give them a shout out, thank them for their time. You got 3 of them that do active recruiting. Junior Coach Allen, junior college level, Coach Robbins, Southern California, Division II, NCAA Division II, and then Coach Butler out in Chicago, Illinois, NAIA level. So reach out to those guys if you have athletes to send their ways. But more importantly, I hope you listen to the message of empathy, having empathy. I hope you listen to the message of having a heart. And I just, again, hope that you can move forward in your lives sensitive to our African American students, players, etc. Folks, have a great rest of the day. Make it a great day, and we'll see you next time.